Welcome to Resiliency Within. I'm Elaine Miller-Karas, and I will be your host today. I want to welcome you all, and also I want to welcome Dr. Michael Sapp, who is the Executive Director of the Trauma Resource Institute, who sponsors our program. And Mike and I wanted to talk today about the Los Angeles County fires that devastated the community that I live in and that he lives in on January 7th, 2025. And since that time, the Trauma Resource Institute mobilized actually the very same day. We contacted one of our uh, collaborators, our partners, the Los Angeles County Department of Mental Health, and we spoke to Dr. Bird, who's one of the deputy directors, about how can we help. And so we have been boots on the ground really since the very beginning in the different ways that we come forward as the Trauma Resource Institute to help after wide scale disasters. But we want to talk today too, not only about what we've been doing as part of the response, and there have been so many people from so many different organizations. It has been quite humbling to just see how the Los Angeles community has responded, and also people outside of LA who have come in and said, how can we help? And I want to really emphasize to all our listeners that we literally have two cities that most of them are gone. And that is the city of Altadena and the city of the Palisades. Both in LA County, they're a little bit wide apart from each other, and they have both experienced such devastation of, literally thousands of homes being lost, businesses, schools that have displaced the community in a county that already was struggling with, housing being expensive and sometimes hard to find. And so to see how the community has rallied has been quite humbling and I think important, Mike, would you say, for us as we've worked within the community. So, Mike, I'm going to ask you if you want to say a few words about the response that the Trauma Resource Institute has made since the fires of January 7th.
Sure. I think one of the things I'm most proud of with our organization is that we've learned how to be responsive really quickly. And this, we do, like you said, we've done work in responding to disasters globally. Um, this happens to be in our backyard. Our main offices are in Claremont, just we're in LA County in the foothills of the same foothills that experienced the fires. And so it felt that much more personal to respond in this way. And so to be able to respond as quickly as we did, and now knowing that the response, I think one of the things I think about is we work really hard at our organization to provide responses that are not just dropping in and getting out. And how do we help support the long-term recovery? Because this is a recovery that's going to last for years. And we've done this with other communities, and we will do this with this community. And so our ability to go in and provide quick, responsive support, I'm really proud of, and knowing that that support is going to last a long time. I've said this in previous interviews. I've said this in wherever I go is we consider this to be sacred work when we're invited into communities, and so our to help in the recovery efforts, and so we don't take that lightly. And so what we're trying to do is provide as much support as we can, uh, and to do it in a way that is helpful to and honoring the communities that we're coming into, like the Palisades and Altadena, and then to do it in a way that is long term that will help them in the long run as well.
Well, and I think when you say that, and I want to just kind of underscore what you've said, I think people don't realize when there is a disaster, unless you have been through a disaster yourself, that we see on our national news and our local news when it happens and all the devastation. There's a lot of press and media in the immediate aftermath, and then it slowly starts to dissipate. And for example, Mike and I were just at a meeting in Altadena at the Collaboratory, which is one of the organizations that has risen up, that is many people in the community and many organizations come together to provide support and also to ongoing support. How can we continue, and what are the needs as we're now like 10 months in since the fires, and we just saw the incredible energy about helping the community, and but also the suffering. I mean, I think it's important for people to know that there are many people that can't move into their homes because even if they didn't burn down, because of the soil, and the soil being contaminated with lead and cyanide and other things that are not healthy for human beings. And the other aspect that we've seen and heard much about is just the lack of response of some of the insurance companies. That here, many people have paid their premiums diligently throughout their lifetime, only to find that either they were underinsured or that the insurance company hasn't been as responsive as they would have hoped. And, 10 months in, we can all as human beings do something for a short period of time. But I think that the realization, oh, that this is, like you said, Mike, this is going to be a long time. It's going to be a journey. And we were talking to some folks yesterday, and we all decided that you couldn't use the word healed because it's healing, because there are new things and new challenges and barriers that come up that maybe you didn't even conceive of when the fires first happened. And so I just want everyone who's listening, nationwide to this, and as I say this, we're in Los Angeles County. We worked in Asheville after the terrible floods. We've worked in other parts of the country after hurricanes. We've worked in Paradise after the Camp Fire. So we are often called in at the times of these disasters that happen, that we call natural disasters. But, sometimes we also feel some of these are human made, like what happened in Altadena with Southern California Edison. And then other times we are also responding to crises such as shootings and things that happen to communities that have been literally human made. And seeing that both of these, all these events that we've seen so many in our country over the last year, that, what can we do as communities to help? And I think that one of the things that we've seen is our wellness skills of the community resiliency model are very simple, can be used across the lifespan. And they certainly aren't the only things that can be used in terms of improving well-being. And we're talking about mind-body well-being, because when we learn to read our nervous system and get back into the zone of well-being, the resilience zone, okay zone, the different ways is that we call it, that really is when we show up as our best selves. We have the availability literally of our prefrontal cortex that is working well to try to figure out how we can individually, familially, and in a community way, build structures and supports so that we can move through this very difficult time in our community. So I think that's part of our dedication, isn't it, Mike? We're going, well, we just want to bring the community resiliency model to everybody that we know, but that doesn't mean that necessarily people are going to know what we do or be as receptive. I think you say, when you say that there's sacred moments that you've seen, as people can touch into that well-being and realize that even though the world around is chaotic and there's still so many things to get through, that when we try to use skills that help us stay in that zone of well-being, that we can maneuver whatever is thrown at us in a much better way. And I'm just wondering if you have any reflections. Yesterday we did a whole day training for a number of survivors and people that are working in the community in Los Angeles, as well as, we offered this free of charge on our on a Zoom call, and we ended up having people come from Houston who'd been in floods in Houston. We had people that came in from Asheville that had been in floods there. We had people from Wilmington, North Carolina, who also had hurricane damage and flooding. I mean, we had a lot of folks there that also were gathering together nationwide to support people that they know are not only suffering in their community, but also providing support to the Los Angeles community as well. And that makes me feel, oh my gosh, this common humanity. we see so prevalent. And that always inspires me as much as, touching into the suffering that we've been seeing in Los Angeles and in other parts of the world as as people who care deeply about the well-being of all of humanity. I know that sits on us in a heavy way. So, Mike, I know I went on and on about that, but what are your thoughts about this?
Oh, so many. I have so many thoughts, and I'm going to try to pick one thread and then maybe pull in a couple others. But one thing I think about as you're talking is the recognition that that I have learned working in this way as a clinical psychologist, coming across this model and how it equips everybody, natural leaders of community, first responders, professional mental health, mental health professionals. I mean, it's anybody can learn these skills. Everybody can learn these skills and learn how to share them with others. To me, there's a beauty to that when we're talking about how do we help communities recover, because it's not just a top-down model. It's not oh, we need to help the professionals. Well, yeah, we can do that. Absolutely. And we know that there's not going to be enough professionals and for everybody to access. And even if people have access to professionals, we know that there are so many people in communities that would may not ever seek services and help from professional mental health providers for any number of reasons. And so, how can we equip a wider network of people that can provide on the ground in the streets active support ongoing, not just drop in and drop out. So there's that piece that I get so excited about the possibility. I guess excited, maybe not the right word, hopeful. Um, I get hopeful when we can teach these skills to people that are in the community because they're in the community. And yes, we have there's such similarities in how our nervous system responds to stress and trauma, which is why someone that has experienced in their community damage due to a flood, there's going to be some unique pieces to their experience, and there's going to be some common humanity experience similarities to that experience. And so, can we teach how people can learn how to regulate their nervous system in response to stress and trauma so that they can stay engaged in the process and better navigate the many different processes that they're going to have to navigate in recovery and in supporting others. So that's one piece I think about is there's absolutely some unique elements to what Altadena has gone through, even unique from what people in the Palisades have gone through. And yet there's such a common human response to these things. And that's what I get really passionate about is how can we help share these skills? Because the other thread I'll pull in really quick is we know that in these early days, especially, but we're not so much in the early days anymore. We're coming up on a year. Um, that oftentimes I think mental health and is often put to the side. Let's make sure that people have a place to live, make sure they have the food. Absolutely. But I don't see them as either or. I don't see them as, oh, let's take care of that first, then we can do that. To me, it's simultaneous. It has to be done simultaneously. And I think that's what I get passionate about our models because I've seen it. I've seen our model be able to be used simultaneously because if we're trying to help people navigate just getting the services they need, boy, we know that when our nervous system is out of sorts, our ability to think gets harder. It just gets harder. When I'm stressed, it's hard for me to make good decisions. It's hard for me to know which way to go. So, so to do it simultaneously, I think is so vital. And I don't know if a lot of people recognize that. I think more and more people are, I think. But that's where I get passionate about. Let's get in there quick.
Well, I think that's, when I first started in this work of working with trauma and stress after disasters, I remember reading something from the American Psychological Association, and they would say, make sure the community's stable first before you go in. And part of that is that you don't want to take resources away from community members that need food, shelter, et cetera. But I think that the other thing that we have learned is that if we can help people, as you say, get back into their resilient zone and stabilize their nervous system, they're much better able to stand in lines for their, food vouchers or to stand in line and fill out FEMA forms or other kinds of services that are available. And so I think one of our wishes, our hopes is that if we can go into communities before a disaster and have this idea of the community resiliency model as prevention, and then when a disaster does hit, the community is already prepared with well-being skills that they can integrate into the many different things that they will provide for their community in the aftermath of a disaster. And we certainly saw that in Wilmington, North Carolina, New Hanover County, that we went in after Hurricane Florence. And they had their own CRM teachers that were helping in the recovery process because their community was really devastated from Hurricane Florence. And now, all these years later, they have they have an army of CRM teachers that are in every part, including human resources in the county, that they are equipped and ready to respond. And I was very touched by that community because when Asheville, which is in Buncombe County in North Carolina, they mobilized. They helped their first responders remember the wellness skills and they helped them when they came back. It was very impressive that with that well-being that we know was that helped with the CRIMP, with the community resiliency model, that they already had that embedded and that they could use that to actually help other communities within their own state. So as we're here in Los Angeles County, we have already trained in the last number of years many people in the community resiliency model in our teacher training programs. And so now, and we met many of them yesterday in a training that we had that was particularly directed on how to use our model with disasters, but they're already out there, boots on the ground. And that to me was one of the most inspiring things about the experience that we had yesterday. But I would think what we also want to let people know that may be listening is that the Trauma Resource Institute is in this for the long haul. We support communities for the long haul with not only workshops, helping people get trained as community resiliency model teachers. And one of the reasons why we wanted to do this show today as well is that we have two trainings coming up for people who are fire affected in the Palisades or in Altadena. And these community resiliency model teacher training programs, one will be online and one is going to be in person. We actually chose the collaboratory in Altadena for that one because it's very central. But people can go free of charge to take our community resiliency model teacher training program, which usually, if you're paying full price, usually is a couple $1,000s per person. So if you're listening or you know someone who's fire affected who may be a natural leader of a community or a mental health therapist, and that can be a psychologist, a social worker, a marriage family therapist, a licensed clinical professional counselor, is that is open to you. And so all you need to go is to the traumaresourceinstitute.com website that you'll hear more about as we go through today and put in an application. Of course, we have a limited number for each training, and it will be first come, first serve. A number of people have already signed up, but if it's something that you think you want to do to contribute to your community in the Los Angeles area, we really recommend that you do that. And some of you I know are not in Los Angeles. I know that sometimes I get people from Mongolia listening to this program, and we also want you to know that we offer every month we offer online community resiliency model teacher training. And so all people have to do is go to our website, they can sign up. And let's say you say, my goodness, I don't know if I can afford that much. We do have a scholarship program that you can apply for because we never want to turn anyone away. We might not be able to get you into a training when you may want to be in a training, but we will work with you to be able to be trained. Because I think, Mike, we both believe in the scaling of the model, and maybe you can talk a little bit about that because I know you've been working with even people in England and in India talking about, okay, we are really scaling things in ways that we could never have imagined.
Well, I think that that's one of the many other things I get passionate about this model. As a clinician, I always had the motto of working myself out of a job. How can I help people in such a way that they don't need my help? Or maybe it's like a dictionary. You pull me off the shelf as a clinician when you need it, right? That was always my intention. This model for me helped me see a realistic way of doing that. And I see that the beauty to me of this is it equips professionals and others to be able to provide really significant help, right? We know that these skills, we know from research that these skills help reduce depressive symptoms, anxiety symptoms, symptoms of post-traumatic stress, and increase well-being. That's what the research consistently shows. Wellness skills that anybody can learn, anybody can share with others. And so to me, that's the scalability is if we can teach, if we can train 20 teachers in a particular area, in a particular organization, in a particular community, they then can go out and start to train and teach these skills to so many others. In one of our impact surveys, we found out that while there's a significant range in how many people our CRIM teachers have trained, there have been some that have trained uh, more than 1,000 people in just 1 year. We know that we have a number of CRIM teachers within various organizations. I'm going to highlight CHLA, Children's Hospital of Los Angeles, that have trained over 4,000 of their staff in just over a year. And that to me, that's the scalability, is if we can equip people within various communities, then they are going out in their communities. They're providing such wonderful help and teaching skills that can be really life altering. That's the feedback we get from many of the places that we've done this all over the world. Like you said, and we've done this in many parts of the world: Nepal, Philippines, Istanbul, DRC. I was just on a call today with a wonderful group of community members in the Democratic Republic of Congo that are learning how to use these skills within their context. And their context is not really good right now. I mean, there's just a lot of violence, so I say all that to say the scalability piece is so exciting, that's the piece that I get really, really passionate about, is how do we equip everybody with these skills?
And I think that's why we tend to look at the community resiliency model as really a strategy for public health.
Yeah,
And public health, it includes mind-body health. It includes how we help people, cultivate that well-being so that it expands. And when there's disasters, that's one of the primary, I guess, purposes of what we try to do that gives, I think, both of us and people in our community, and we have a worldwide community, that purpose and meaning that sometimes we can lose when things in life gets pretty rough. So one of the things we wanted to do today as well is we wanted to talk about getting through the holidays. We have Thanksgiving just around the corner. We have we have Christmas, we have Hanukkah, we have Kwanzaa, we have different types of holiday celebrations, and there's probably many more that I don't know of. And when we have a disaster like that and we lose everything, so they're mementos. We might lose our Christmas ornaments or certain precious um, items that we have that represent not only the present but maybe our past. That, oh, grandma gave me this, and grandma said that her grandma gave her this. And when those things disappear, it can be another heartache. And even though people will say over and over again, I'm so glad that we're alive and we survived, it doesn't mean that you don't have grief over the other things that were your collections of a lifetime. And so we have seen that over and over in the Palisades. We've seen it in Altadena, and we've seen it in other places of the world that we've been in. And so, how do we get through the holidays, and how do we start? How do we, with all the loss that's happened, how do we acknowledge the suffering? And because we never say, oh, let's just be positive, positive, and say, oh, yes, everything
yeah,
is rainbow and roses, when it doesn't feel that way.
yeah.
But it doesn't mean that you can't create new memories that have great meaning in how you will go forward in the world. So what we're going to do in the second half of the show is we're really going to do a deep dive into what are some strategies? What have we learned? What can we also are going to share some things that we are offering to the community who've experienced the fires in Los Angeles County, and give some other ideas that you also can implement for yourselves and in your own homes, wherever you may live in the world. And so we will be back in just a couple minutes, and we will continue this discussion with Dr. Michael Sapp, and we will talk about getting through the holidays. We'll be back in just a few moments. Welcome back. I'm Elaine Miller-Karas, the host of Resiliency Within, and I'm with Dr. Michael Sapp, the Executive Director of the Trauma Resource Institute. Our organization, the Trauma Resource Institute, who sponsors this program, have been very actively involved in helping in the fire recovery since the terrible fires that devastated Los Angeles County on January 7th, 2025. And so, as we are approaching Thanksgiving and the holidays, we're going to talk a little bit about what can we offer, what can we do to get through the holiday season when many of us, many people have lost so much and are still grappling. And of course, when I say still, I just want to say and are grappling, which is completely normal, with the healing process. So, Mike, I'm going to start with you. What are some of the ideas that you think are important regarding moving through the holidays?
I think number one of the major things is to understand that it is normal for us to, like you said earlier, as we went to break, that holidays are reminders not only of, yes, there's some rituals and wonderful traditions that we have that we're celebrating, but it that can remind us of maybe some traditions that are now lost or some rituals that are now lost because maybe they were tied to a specific location, right? And so to be able to acknowledge that, yes, there's going to be a stirring up of loss and grief and reminders of that loss and grief. And then also being able to say, okay, then acknowledging that, and then maybe looking at, well, what maybe new rituals, what maybe new traditions could we create that can help us celebrate and find some form of celebration? Because I think that's the other piece is sometimes we feel like, well, can we celebrate? I
Mhm.
mean, we've experienced this great loss. Is it okay to celebrate? Is it okay to have moments where we feel less distress or even joy, if that's even, and I think that's the piece that's really hard for some of us is being able to say, you know what, just because we're creating this new ritual, this new tradition, maybe we're having moments where we're experiencing some form of peace or calm. It doesn't negate the loss. It doesn't minimize the loss that we've had. It's just trying to shift our intention intentionally to the things that help us feel a little bit better or a lot better at times. And I think that's a challenge during the holidays.
Well, I think too, as I'm hearing you say that, one of the things that's happened with the dislocation when you have complete, cities that are gone, is that people had community members, their next door neighbor, or maybe they had a Christmas tree laying on their street. Who knows what they may have had. But I think that one of the challenges have been that I've heard over and over again is how do we bring community members that we may have people living in all different parts of Los Angeles, maybe even outside of LA County, in San Diego County, in Riverside, Orange County. And so I think people are intentionally inviting people to gatherings, maybe at parks that are still there, or sometimes the parks that are being renewed. I was at a park, actually, you were with me, Mike, when we went to that one park,
Yeah,
and they had created a beautiful mural. They had new equipment for the kids, and it was the renewal process of the artwork they had done were representations of different parts of Altadena that were very special to people. And I mean, just you couldn't help but be moved when we were there and
right.
and experiencing that. So I think that there are ways that we can gather together, even if things have been lost. But I also want to lift up a conversation that I had. I was invited to come to a home in the Palisades, and there was a gathering of many people, and most of them had lost their home. There were people of different ages, like the parents, and there were young people in the kind of the 20-year-old, 18 to 20-year-old age brackets. And so people were talking about, I always ask the question, and I think this is one of the ways that can help us get through holidays is, what or who is helping you right now, if anything or anyone? And I always am so touched by what people say. And in this particular gathering, at the very end, they said, we realized that we were very close friends before, but we're even closer now. I mean, there's a kind of like it's surprising um, experience that has happened as a result of this terrible thing that happened to their community. But one of the young people there said, he actually kind of said this really sweet thing, and I'm not going to remember exactly what he said, but he said, well, this may be odd for me to say because we were at a home that had survived. Many homes right around were completely gone, including most of the people that were in the room. And he said, I just think it's so interesting that this house survived. He said, because this house was oftentimes the house that we all would come together for celebrations. He says, I remember me and the other, the older son that also was in the room. I remember all the Halloweens that we would take pictures on the front porch. And I remember times that we had other holiday celebrations, and it was all in this house. So isn't it curious that this house survived? And and everyone, even the ones who'd lost homes, are like nodding when he's saying that. But I thought, oh, here's this young person that, with the suffering that was all around, clearly that day that we were all together and being able to talk about the suffering, but also about what else is true, that's what he lifted up, about the acknowledgement of what didn't burn, what was still there, and what could still be cultivated. And that wasn't to minimize the
Yeah.
suffering of those that had lost everything, because there was a lot of suffering in that room.
Yeah.
But then there was so much love that was coming to people that were in that community that I just kind of like go, can I be adopted? I mean, it was just an amazing demonstration of a community coming together. And then that young person having that little hopeful idea that did impact all of us when he said that. So I guess when I'm saying that out loud and thinking about getting through the holidays, think about those gatherings coming together, because you can make new memories and new meanings even with the loss that's happened. And I hope people know that as I'm saying that, I am not
Right.
in any way. My intention is not to minimize the gravity and the loss that has happened.
Yeah.
So, Mike, what else are you thinking about?
Well, and I think that's it, is I think anything we can find intentionally, what I often will say is to turn down the volume of the distress and the suffering, because I know there are many people that are still living in hotels or alternative housing, have been going from housing situation to housing, so there's such, it's still so unsettled. And I think that's what I appreciated, like you said earlier, about what we talked about yesterday, that the healing process is an ing process, not an ed, not a past tense. We don't get to a destination of, oh, we're totally healed, we're going to be fine from here on out. It's, oh my goodness, we're going to have reminders throughout our life, right? Not just now, that will stir up that distress. And so, can we identify ways of actively, intentionally pulling in what in our model we might call a resource, whether it is just remembering, if the thought of the loss of that location, if, oh, we always spent, the first night of Hanukkah at this house, and that house is no longer here anymore, how can we honor those memories and then look for intentional ways of making new ones, right? So it's not about just pushing that out of our memory. It's, well, what was it about that house? What was it about those memories? Was there one that stood out that when we bring to mind, we can hold that sense of joy and peace and calm? Yes, it's going to come laced with sadness and grief. That's going to be there. Absolutely. We don't want to just negate it. We don't want to minimize it. Can we intentionally bring our attention to the parts of that memory, of those memories that are that can turn down the volume of that distress enough? And then maybe there are aspects of those memories that can help inform, oh, as we make new memories, we want to make sure we can do this, this, and this, and so I think that's one of the harder pieces to this, is recognizing there's going to be grief and loss, and can we recognize what was it about those many rituals, that those traditions, that can be so helpful in informing how we can make new traditions and new um, rituals, not to deny and ignore the distress, but to turn down the volume of that distress enough.
And I think that being able to do that, I think, is something that can help people get through what
Yeah.
may be very difficult in the next few weeks as we move through the holiday season. I also want to kind of highlight some of the things that we are doing at the Trauma Resource Institute to help the community. So we have what we call circles of connection. They're happening every 2 weeks. They're an hour. They're at different times of the day. You can go to our website to find out when the next one is, and it's a drop-in. People can talk about anything they want to talk about. And we really launched it for people who were fire affected. But I think, Mike, do we get other people there that are not fire affected?
Oh
Because
yeah.
I see the circles of connection and go,
Yeah.
I need this right now. So we really want to offer that as people are listening today, that go to traumaresourceinstitute.com and you can see the dates that are coming up and you can get a link to come to one of our circles of connection. Because I think that ongoing support, it's okay to get that ongoing support. I've had more than one person say, it's been really difficult for me to be the one who's receiving help because I've always been the helper.
Mhm.
I've always been the person who's donated my time or my money, and now I'm the one who needs help. And when we have that kind of reverse order of things, it kind of can startle us in terms of, the reorganization, even of our sense of self, of how we walk through the world. But I think the other part of that is how humbling it is for all of us to know maybe that we all need help. I know that I need help sometimes. Mike, do you need help sometimes? I think you
A
do.
lot of times,
A
Elaine,
lot
a
of
lot of
times,
times.
right? I know that we've helped each other through
Yeah.
many different things. But there's another project that I want to talk about in more detail. That I'm an older person, I'm no longer a spring chicken, as they say, and we have come up with something that we are calling the Legacy Project, and it actually came, and I'm going to tell you how this evolved. I was literally in a parking lot in Altadena with one of our staff, and we wanted to take a picture in front of this really beautiful mural that had a beautiful butterfly. And so we're going, oh, I guess I could take it with my phone. But then there was a person who just walked through the parking lot. I said, would you mind taking our picture? And so she stopped and she took our picture. And then we started talking with her. And she had lost she had lost her home in Altadena as her mother did. And we just said, well, how's it going? And are you getting the help that you need? And she just told us about her grandma. And her grandma, who was in her 90s, was now living with her uncle in a motel or in a apartment. And she was worried about her grandma because her grandma's joy was tending her garden. And she really believed that she had the best vegetables and that's what kept her and the family healthy. So the grandma was feeling pretty low and she was worried about her grandma being depressed and her grandma didn't want to eat. And so we just started talking about, well, how could we help some of the elders that may be in that situation? And I really think this is important because those of us that are older, we've lived most of our life. And so when we lose everything that we have built over decades, it can be especially hard because we don't have decades left to rebuild. And so, how do we help our elders, perhaps in thinking about in a way that is helping them to call up the memories in a way that's safe, giving them the space to have tears if they need to have tears, but also to create something that may be part of what their legacy can be for their family, for their community in the future. So we came up with the idea that's called the Legacy Project. And we are actually, Mike, you're going to be launching it on the 14th
Mm.
of November at one of the locations in Altadena. And then on the 15th, we'll be launching it in the Palisades. So it's a collaborative community initiative led by the Trauma Resource Institute. And the project brings together survivors, families, and youth in an intergenerational journey of healing, creativity, and remembrance. When the fires swept the neighborhoods, families lost, as we've been talking about, not only their homes, but cherished photographs, keepsakes. But the story lives on. And one of the comments that has been made regarding this is, I realized I didn't need a photo because the memory was etched in my mind. Now that may help some people, but not everyone. But when we started talking to people, we realized that on Facebook, many times there are years and years and years of photos that have been posted. And what if we went into a community setting, we brought a printer, we had our computers ready, and we have scrapbooks within a box that people could start to work on, each page being part of their legacy and their memories, and it would be open-ended. And so the staff, when we were starting to think about this, they actually did it with me. And I thought, well, okay, I haven't lost my home, but I certainly am getting older and I have lots of memories. But what if I didn't have these pictures? We found a picture on Facebook. I put my husband on, I think it was our 25th wedding anniversary, and we were there in the center. And then also things that were coming to mind about that 25th wedding anniversary, but just about our life together. And one of the things that we've been together through adversity, which is really true. And as I've walked through the Palisades in Altadena, I've heard many people say that, but we have each other. Then another page of the book was a, they asked me about what was one of my favorite vacations. It was like a trip to Sedona. So I had all these wonderful things that they had purchased at Michael's stores to put into the book, and I made this beautiful collage of this vacation without one picture, but I could put little quotations about the memory. And then the last one was a drawing of a tree. I love trees. And many trees were lost in the fires, but there's many trees that we can see that they've survived. And also I put animals in there because I love dogs, but I'm sharing that experience of like they were experimenting with this idea with me and thinking, oh my, I just love doing this myself. But if we can bring this to people who've lost everything, may that be helpful. So we're launching it this next coming weekend, the 14th and 15th, and we're planning to do it in many locations in Altadena and in the Palisades, because this also can be a scrapbook remembering the holidays of their life that were meaningful. And also they could ask family members, hey, do you have pictures of that first day of Hanukkah that we had at the house 10 years ago, 5 years ago, last year? Or do you have pictures of Christmas or the different celebrations that we've had for Halloween? Halloween is a very big thing in our communities in Los Angeles. So those kinds of things can be recreated. And so these scrapbooks, these legacy books, we are going to help to create this in different parts of Los Angeles that have been fire affected. So really excited about that project, Mike. I don't know if you want to say anything about it because we've been talking about it right and left, but it really was inspired by that woman in the parking lot who shared with me about her grandma. I wish I would have her name because I would love to talk with her to let her know that her grandmother and her sweet story that she shared with me really inspired. Really, it's going to happen. We've got the books, we've got the scrapbooks, we've got everything ready to go.
I think what I appreciate about that so much is that that's what we do naturally when we're overwhelmed, when we're stressed, is we look for things to help bring our distress down. And I can't tell you how many times I've looked at old photos or I've, listened to songs or I start to think about memories that are that were helpful for me. And when I do that, I notice my nervous system, I'm just going to speak in that language because that's the language of our model, comes back, it starts to come back into balance a little enough. It doesn't mean my sadness may not, may dissipate entirely. Sometimes it does. Sometimes I still have that sadness, but I feel okay enough. And I think what's so powerful about this project, this legacy project, is it taps into something that we already do naturally. I mean, I can't tell you how many times, having not lost my home, maybe even looking at my phone when a photo will pop up and it just brings me back to that memory. But then sometimes I'll hear someone else talk about in our family gatherings a memory. I'm like, oh my gosh, I haven't thought about that in so long. We don't have pictures of it, but we have the oral tradition that has been passed down,
Yes.
and I think that's the power to me is that sharing these oral traditions, sharing photos, calling up memory that are of events that are so meaningful for us. Does that magically help insurance companies respond faster? No. Does it help us get out of this hotel and back into our home by tomorrow? Maybe not. Probably not. However, when we bring it, can that be? Uh, I remember hearing someone say it this way, and I appreciate this. Sometimes we may be walking in a desert, and as much as I would want to pull you out of that desert so you don't have to walk in it, sometimes we're just in this desert and we're going to be walking in this desert, but can I give you a glass of water? Can we give you some food and nourishment? I think these types of things help nourish our body so that
Mm,
we can continue in that journey.
mm.
Because right now there's so much loss, so much grief, so much. I mean, and this is just the fire, never mind some of the things that may have happened unrelated to the fire that is also impacting our nervous systems. But
Well, and
can,
I
right?
think that is something to also remember when you're impacted with a disaster. It doesn't mean that, your husband may be going through cancer treatment, your old dog may be sick, and you may have to, help him transition to doggy heaven. I mean,
Right.
we've heard story after story of, oh my gosh, the fires were so horrible, but then I'm also dealing with this, this, and this.
And it's layer on layer on
And
layer.
and life doesn't stop for any of
Right.
us just
Right.
because there's been a disaster, right?
But
But
there's something about this project for me that offers that kind of, it's going to sound so silly to say it this way, almost like a rest stop.
yeah.
You
It
know,
it can be, I think, and I think the other thing it can be, it can restore kind of the sense of identity. I
yeah.
haven't lost
Mm,
my memories. I haven't lost, the life that I've led, even though the house isn't there any longer. And I think it also, and one of the things that we had thought about is bringing, teenagers in to work with the older persons. And this actually just came up yesterday that one of the elders we were talking to about the project said, I it would be hard for me because if even if I tried to write down a story, I have neuropathy in my fingers. So I can't write. And I said, well, that's the reason why we have other people there that you can tell the story to. They can write it for you and put it into the scrapbook. So we're also trying to make also accommodations, knowing that elders may have certain limitations and may also, because of physical pain or other things that they're experiencing, may just have a shorter period of time in terms of paying attention because of those things. But then they'll have that scrapbook in their box to take home with them that they can continue to work on it with their family members. And we're planning, and it's not completely worked out yet, is there'll be drop-ins where they can come back with their book and continue to work in community. Because there is something about being in community, especially in the days of podcasts, the days of Zoom, where it is important for people to be with each other physically, because there is that, as one person said, I can't remember what they said to me after the fire, but I remember when they hugged me. And that hug was what I needed at that moment. We can't hug each other on Zoom, but we can hug each other in person. And I think that's important for us all to remember as well. But I think there's another thing I think for elders too, in terms of the community. It does leave a lasting legacy that you have worked on with intention, either with someone who is a volunteer or a family member. I was talking to one woman and she said, well, I think my mom would really love this, but I don't think she'd want to talk to someone outside of our family. So can I come with her? And we can do it together. I said, absolutely. And then another group said, well, we have a family that just came into our center and they came in, the mom and dad and their adult children. Do you think that we could have that more book a book for each family member? I said, yes, I think we could, because of course each one's going to have their own memory and they also have lost things. So I also to remember that we're talking about elders, but now that we've been talking, we're listening to the community, we realize that we need to do more than than the elders. We need to make them available to families. And there's already other people in communities, like they're going to be doing scrapbooks for kids. And we haven't talked much about helping kids through the holidays, but whatever way that we can to withhold, to still have traditions. If you're Christians and you have a Christmas tree, to make sure, you're maybe go to one of the many offerings that we've been hearing about making ornaments and creating new memories, like you're saying, Mike,
yeah.
can also be very helpful. So, the children, have been going through their own um, struggles, and I think we'll be having another show about children. But I wanted to let people know too, to kind of transition as I see our time's quickly slipping away, that what we're planning to do with resiliency within in the next few weeks is inviting some of the stakeholders in the community of Los Angeles to kind of and join me here to talk about what they're doing to help nurture and sustain their community as we move into the holiday season and beyond. So you'll be hearing from different people that are doing amazing work, and hopefully some of the leaders, I'll get some of the leaders of some of the collaboration centers that have risen up not only in the Altadena area, but also in the Palisades. So that is our hope for the future. Now, Mike, I'm going to ask you a question because as the executive director of the Trauma Resource Institute, I know that you've got some grant funding that
Mhm.
takes you through the end of December. But I've also seen, because I've been working pretty hard in the community, as I think you know, and going into many parts of Los Angeles, um, we need to move past December as
Mhm.
well. So does the Trauma Resource Institute have any plans to continue to be supportive of the community, even if the grant funding is no longer there? Because I know that we were doing it before there was any grant funding and we were just boots on the ground. So can you share a little bit about that with us?
Well, I think that's it for me. We were responding and going into communities well before we got additional funding to provide what we're providing now for free. Our values are such uh, that we are one of our biggest values is generosity. One of our biggest values is accessibility, affordability. So when we go in and help, we make it happen. If we can get additional funding to help support us, that's what we work really hard on the back end to try to do. But
And if
and
not,
I'm laughing because part of our DNA as an organization is to provide the services and try to help support whether we get funding or not. And we have a really wonderful, large community of independent contractors that will often step in with us. Our staff works so tirelessly to be able to make sure we provide support even when funding may not be there. And so we work really hard at that. And so I can assure you that just because this particular bucket of funding ends December 31st, our presence, our support will continue well beyond that. And of course, we'll look for additional funding to help support that as much as we can. Regardless, this is something that we do.
well, I'm so glad to hear that. I thought that might be your answer, but you're reminding
Yeah.
me too, because in the first few weeks after the fire, we were contacted by the LA County Department of Mental Health as and said, can you do something, create an offering to support LA County Department of Parks and Recreation? And we said, okay, we're there. And so we didn't have funding, but we
Mhm.
pivoted the whole organization. And I think we even had some people that came that were from out of town that were there as well.
Yes.
But we also mobilized many volunteers that have been part of our community in Los Angeles for years and years and years.
Yeah.
And I have to say, we had about 30 people show up, which we were so grateful for. We did a little training for them before we went in to help the young people who had been the individuals who had manned the shelters, who were working with kids, who so their parents could fill out FEMA forms and figure out where they were going to live. I mean, these young people at LA Parks and Rec, not only the city, we did one for the city
Yeah.
later, but for the county as well. I have to tell you, you could only be proud
Yeah.
of the youth that live in Los Angeles County when you saw how they showed up. And
Yeah.
I think they learned things about themselves. We certainly learned things about them, but I just think as we're ending today, when I think about all the suffering that's in the world right now, and sometimes that we always hear about youth that are getting into trouble. Oh my gosh, the youth that we saw in LA were only to be proud of
Yeah.
and proud to be an Angeleno and how the community has been coming together to provide support. So, Mike, any last word? We've got just a couple minutes left.
I think I would encourage you, for those of you who are suffering, find, if you can, moments of peace, of calm. Pull to mind a memory. Pull to, listen to something, whatever you can to intentionally have a pause button on that suffering. It doesn't mean it goes away necessarily, but that will help you reengage. I think for those of you who are family members, people from out of state, please know that this is a journey that they're going to be on for a long time. So please just support them as reminders continue to happen. I've heard recently someone say, "Oh, I had a family member from out of state say, well, that happened a year ago. Aren't you okay? Aren't you over it now?" We're like, "Whoa." So
Yeah, yeah,
please just
yeah.
know this is
It's
an ing process, not an ed process. This is not past tense. So please look for ways to support them and help them through this long journey of recovery.
Well, and I'm just going to say one of the questions we asked the young people at LA Parks and Rec is
Mm,
that, can you remember like a moment of generosity that you either witnessed or maybe that you participated in or someone gave to you? And they all had amazing moments, and we could see their well-being just
yeah,
expand as remembering when a little boy, you know, was able to get some Legos and all because
yeah.
all his Legos had been burned away and just little teeny moments like that. And I think it was very inspiring. And they were very inspiring as an organization because they had put little statements all around this big auditorium of the wonderful things parents had said about how helpful the lifeguards and the coaches and all these young people at LA County Parks and Rec had given to their family during this most difficult time. So, as I end today, I always say, what else is true? And yes, they're suffering, but remember those acts of generosity. And until we meet again, Mike, thank you so much for joining me again on Resiliency Within. And until we meet again, um, stay safe and remember what else is true.